You think you've heard it all? Think again. Two best friends were brutally murdered in broad daylight, and the crime was so savage it brought even the toughest cops to tears. But the real twist? The man who did it was closer to them than anyone could have ever imagined. Don't click away. The truth is more chilling than you can imagine. As we dig deeper into this case, there's a lesson we can all take away, something that could save a life. Stay tuned, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what you can do to protect your loved ones. Trust me, you won't want to miss this. Delphi, Indiana, was a small, picturesque town nestled in the heart of the Midwest. Quiet, peaceful. It was the kind of town where children ride their bikes along tree-lined streets and families gather at the park on summer evenings, laughing and enjoying the warm breeze. This was the town where life moves at a slower pace, where the world feels safe, and the worst thing that might happen is a fender bender at the intersection. But sometimes behind the pristine image of a perfect town lurks a darkness that no one expected. The perfect town hides a darkness no one saw coming. For years, the town lived with a reputation for being safe, where nothing bad ever happened, where the worst was a child lost at the fair or an occasional petty crime. But in February of 2017, that reputation would be broken. The sound of sirens and police cars racing down quiet streets, the look on neighbors' faces as whispers spread like wildfire. Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. A crime had been committed, a brutal crime, one that even seasoned detectives were unprepared for. A brutal crime, the likes of which even seasoned detectives had never seen, was about to shock this town to its core. Abigail Williams, known as Abby to her friends, was the kind of girl who lit up a room with her smile. Only 13, but wise beyond her years, she had a heart as big as the town of Delphi itself. She was a straight-A student, a cheerleader with a contagious laugh, and the kind of person who made every friendship feel special. Then there was Liberty German, Libby, just 14, but with a spirit that made her seem older, like she could take on the world. Her energy was infectious, her sense of humor always just a little offbeat, always finding a way to make others laugh when they needed it most. Together, Abby and Libby were inseparable, best friends who shared everything, stories, secrets, and dreams. They spent their afternoons walking around town, hanging out, taking pictures, and just being teenage girls. But above all, they had each other's backs. They had no idea that this friendship, this bond forged over years of shared experiences, would be put to the ultimate test on one fateful day. Their friendship was full of promise, laughter, and memories. But in one fateful moment, everything changed. February 3rd, 2017, the two girls had a sleepover the night before. No school, thanks to a snow day. The entire day was theirs for the taking. They planned to spend it as they always did, exploring the world around them. They were carefree, full of excitement, as only young teens can be. They talked about everything, future dreams, boys, and the upcoming summer. But their perfect day, one filled with innocence and adventure, was about to take a sharp, terrifying turn. At 1:30 p.m., Libby's older sister, Kelsey, dropped the girls off at the entrance to the Monon High Bridge Trail. The plan was simple. They were going to take a short walk through the woods, a leisurely afternoon stroll, one last adventure before the day was over. But little did Abby and Libby know this walk, this innocent act of friendship, would be their last. Abby and Libby's innocent adventure takes a horrific turn. The two girls, no more than a mile away from the safety of the town, walked down the trail, laughing, joking, taking Snapchat pictures like any teenagers would. The world was still bright for them. There was no reason to believe this moment wouldn't last forever. But at 2:13 p.m., Libby's phone recorded a brief video, the infamous Snapchat clip that would haunt the entire town. In it, you can hear the voice of a man in the background. "Down the hill," he commands. No one expected this. No one thought that a simple walk in the woods could lead to such terror. Little did they know, their final moments were about to be stolen by someone they would never expect. As they walked down that trail, a shadow was approaching, a figure who would change everything. A voice on Libby's phone, one that she captured without thinking, would soon become the chilling key to unlocking a mystery that would rock the community of Delphi forever. Their laughter would soon fade, their smiles would disappear, and the innocence of that moment would be replaced by a nightmare no one could have predicted. Like this video, if you think that no one should ever be taken too soon, especially not two innocent girls with a lifetime ahead of them, their story deserves to be heard. It was supposed to be a fun day, a snow day to be exact. No school, just a day to relax, laugh, and enjoy the company of good friends. Abby and Libby had spent the night together at Libby's grandmother's house. They'd stayed up late, talking, watching movies, and eating snacks, the sort of sleepover memories that last a lifetime. The next morning, February 13th, 2017, the world outside was covered in snow. The streets of Delphi were quiet, the kind of peaceful morning that only comes after a fresh snowfall. It was a perfect day for a walk, and the two girls couldn't have been more excited to get out and explore. They'd planned this for weeks. It was supposed to be a fun, snowy day, nothing out of the ordinary. But what followed would haunt everyone who knew them. At 1:30 p.m., Libby's older sister, Kelsey, dropped them off at the entrance to the Mon High Bridge Trail. It was a familiar spot, a place they'd visited many times before. The trail wasn't far from home, just a short walk through the woods. But on this day, there was something different about it, something they couldn't have known at the time. With their backpacks on and their phones in hand, they set off down the snow-covered path, chatting and laughing as they went. The cold air didn't seem to bother them. They were happy, carefree, wrapped up in the world of a friendship that felt invincible. But in those moments, hidden from their view, danger was lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. Libby's Snapchat video captures a figure on the bridge, a chilling premonition of the danger that awaits them. It was just another normal part of their day when Libby decided to capture a quick video on her Snapchat. They'd been walking down the trail for a while, taking in the fresh snow and snapping pictures of the beautiful landscape around them. At 2:13 p.m., the video captured something that no one could have predicted. In the background, there was a figure, a man, standing on the bridge. His appearance was fleeting, but it was clear enough for Libby to capture him with her phone. See ya here. At that moment, the figure in the video watches them from afar, but his true intentions are unknown. This brief moment, the sound of Libby's phone capturing the image of that man, would be the last sign of normalcy in the girl's day. What seemed like a harmless snapshot would soon reveal itself to be a chilling premonition. The figure stood, motionless on the bridge, watching them from afar. At that moment, they had no idea who he was or what he was about to do. But one thing was clear. Their walk through the woods was about to take a turn they never saw coming. Share this video if you believe every missing person deserves to be found. The world needs to know what happened that day and how it changed everything for two families. What started as a carefree day in the woods turned into a nightmare beyond belief. The moment Abby and Libby stepped onto the Mon High Bridge, they had no idea that this familiar place, this bridge they'd crossed countless times before, would become the site of a tragedy that would forever alter their lives. What started as a carefree day in the woods turned into a nightmare beyond belief. As the two girls walked along the bridge, the air felt thick, almost too still, as if the world around them had suddenly gone quiet. They were no longer laughing or chatting. The weight of the moment, the growing unease, seemed to hang in the air. Neither of them knew why they felt it. Just an instinct, perhaps, but something felt off. At 2:13 p.m., Libby's phone recorded the brief glimpse of a man standing in the background, an image that now seems like the first glimpse of the horror about to unfold. That brief moment was the calm before the storm. And then they heard it. The voice, rough and commanding, cut through the silence. It was a voice that would haunt them forever, one that they never imagined they would hear, especially in the middle of a peaceful afternoon. "Down the hill," the voice ordered. The words echoed, chilling and harsh, cutting through the stillness. The voice wasn't asking them, he was telling them. There was no hesitation, no softness, only cold command. The killer's voice is captured on Libby's phone as he orders them to go down the hill. Libby's phone captured the voice, the words frozen in time. The phone, which had just moments before been recording their laughter and fun, now held evidence, proof of the terror that was about to unfold. For a split second, the girls must have frozen. They had to process what was happening, what the stranger's intentions were, what it meant to be told to go down the hill, to walk away from the safety they had once known. But they had no time to think. The last sound Libby's phone recorded was the voice of the killer. The killer. What happened next was even more horrifying. The sound of the voice was the last thing Libby's phone recorded, just before the screen went silent. It was as if everything in their world stopped, just for a moment. Then the horror truly began. What happened next? What did this man want? Was he a random stranger, or was there something more sinister at play? The answer was even more horrifying. As we see in this story, one of the first things that stood out was how unaware Abby and Libby were of the danger they were in. While they had fun taking pictures and walking down the trail, the danger was only a few steps away, hidden in plain sight. Lesson 1, never underestimate the risks, even in the most familiar or seemingly safe places. Always trust your instincts. If something feels off, no matter how small it seems, it's important to act. And remember, when you're out in the world, especially with your children or loved ones, make sure you know exactly where they're going and who they're with. Keep watching because this lesson will be much clearer after we unpack the rest of this chilling story. What began as a missing person case soon spiraled into something much worse. Libby's father, Derek German, arrived at the trailhead by 3:15 p.m., just over an hour after the girls had been expected to meet him. He had no idea what awaited him. His phone calls had gone unanswered. The panic that had started to creep into his voice as he left his house only intensified as he walked up to the spot where his daughter and her best friend Abby had planned to meet him. Derek called out for them, his voice breaking through the crisp winter air. But there was no answer. What began as a missing person case soon spiraled into something much worse. But nobody could have prepared for what they would find. At first, Derek hoped it was a misunderstanding, a delay. Maybe they had wandered off a bit too far. But as the minutes passed, the worry began to grow. By the time 5 p.m. rolled around, what had started as a small search turned into something far more serious. The sheriff's department was called. Then, the Indiana State Police. This was no longer just a case of two girls losing track of time. Something far darker was at play. The community's heart began to race as word spread through town. The first few hours, people thought they'd be found, just lost somewhere nearby. But as night fell, the fear began to settle in. The search became frantic, people combing through the woods with flashlights, calling out their names. The search was growing larger, but there was no sign of the two girls. Fear gripped the town of Delphi as the minutes stretched into hours. Their faces were everywhere, on flyers posted to street corners, on the news, in the hands of every concerned citizen. But nothing was working. At 12:00 p.m. and the following day, the unimaginable happened. The bodies of Abby and Libby were found. But the scene, the way they were found, was beyond anything anyone could have imagined. The bodies, discarded like nothing more than trash, had been posed. The ground beneath them was disturbed, but it was not what anyone expected. The police discover the girls' bodies, and the crime scene is bizarre and unsettling. Abby and Libby were found with their throats slashed, their bodies left eerily positioned in the woods. The sticks that lay across their bodies were not randomly placed. They were arranged carefully, strategically, like a twisted form of art. It wasn't just a murder, It was a deliberate, cold act meant to shock, to terrify, and to make a statement. The girls had been taken from the woods, only to be left there. Their final moments of terror turned into something grotesque, as if the killer wanted to make them a part of his own disturbing message. The search was over, but the horror had just begun for the families and the community. What came next would send shockwaves throughout the small town. The families, already devastated, would now be faced with a new reality, one where the killer was still out there, lurking. They hadn't just lost their children, they were about to lose their peace forever. The real investigation had just begun. Subscribe now if you're ready for the truth. Justice doesn't just happen, it's something we fight for. Don't miss the next part of this story. The search for the killer was far from over, but with each passing hour, hope began to fade. The community of Delphi, still reeling from the loss of Abby and Libby, was now forced to confront a chilling reality. The killer was still out there. The police knew they needed something, anything, to break the case wide open. The clues left behind were sparse, but there was one piece of evidence that could change everything. The sketch revealed a chilling face. Was it the breakthrough the police needed? Libby's phone, still recording, had captured the voice of the man who would later become known as the bridge guy. The brief audio of his words, "down the hill," sent shivers down the spine of everyone who listened. But it wasn't just the voice that was haunting. It was the face, the man caught on Libby's phone, walking across the bridge, his steps measured, deliberate. The police quickly turned to the public, releasing a sketch of the suspect. The hope was simple. Anyone would recognize him. They needed help. For the first time, a potential lead was staring them right in the face. The sketch was unmistakable. The community was convinced this was their answer, the breakthrough they'd been waiting for. The search became more focused. The calls to action grew louder. They had a face now, and the killer didn't seem like such a shadow anymore. As tips flooded in, the town felt like they were one step closer to justice. But what came next was far more frustrating than anyone could have imagined. Despite thousands of tips pouring in, no one could definitively link the man in the sketch to anyone in Delphi. Eyewitnesses who saw the man on the bridge could offer no new details. His face remained a mystery. No one could seem to place him, and no one could come forward with solid information. The case, once buzzing with hope, started to feel like a never-ending cycle of dead ends. Despite thousands of tips, no clear suspect emerges. The investigation dragged on, stalling with little progress. The police had a face but no name. They had a voice but no lead. The killer, it seemed, had vanished into thin air, leaving the town in limbo. The case was going cold. The case was going cold. The search continued, but it seemed like the killer had vanished into thin air. What the police didn't know was that this would be only the beginning of the long and twisted journey that would keep the town of Delphi and the world on edge for years to come. Who was the bridge guy, and why had no one come forward? As the investigation into the Delphi murders continued, the police hit a wall. The tips kept coming, but none of them led anywhere substantial. Yet sometimes the smallest clue can unravel the biggest mystery. Sometimes the smallest clue can unravel the biggest mystery. Richard Allen was about to become the focus of the investigation. Back in 2017, right after the murders, a tip was called in by someone who claimed to have been in the area that day. His name was Richard Allen, and he mentioned that he had seen something suspicious, something worth investigating. The tip seemed innocent enough at the time, a man just trying to help out. But because of a clerical error, Richard's name was lost in the case files. Richard Allen wasn't seen as a serious lead. He lived just minutes away from the crime scene. But at the time, no one thought much of it. He had been one of the many people who had come forward, offering a tidbit of information in hopes of finding the person responsible. What the investigators didn't realize was that Richard was about to become something much more significant in the case. But what was even more unsettling was that Richard Allen had quietly been living right under their noses all this time, just a stone's throw from where the two girls were murdered. His proximity to the crime scene made him a very real suspect, but no one had connected the dots. Not yet. What followed would change the course of the entire investigation. After 5 long years, the case seemed to stall, but in Boy 2, a fresh set of eyes began looking at all the old tips. That's when they stumbled upon Richard Allen's overlooked name. His original tip about being in the area was revisited, and everything started to click into place. The tip Richard gave years ago was overlooked, and he was living just minutes from where the girls were murdered. The thought that the killer might have been living right there in town, hiding in plain sight, sent a shockwave through the investigation team. But even with this new lead, there was still doubt. Was Richard Allen the killer? Or was there something even darker lurking beneath the surface? But was this the killer? Or was there something even darker lurking beneath the surface? The road to answers wasn't going to be easy, and the investigators knew that they were only scratching the surface. After Richard Allen's tip finally surfaced, it made us realize how crucial it is to document and report even the smallest of clues. His initial call to police, though it seemed insignificant at the time, ended up being a key piece in solving the case. Lesson 2. Teach your loved ones the importance of speaking up. No matter how small or seemingly irrelevant a detail might seem, it could be the missing piece of the puzzle. If you're ever in doubt, make the call, report the tip. Your one small action might save a life. The lessons will get even more significant as we dive into what truly happened later. Keep watching. There's more to uncover. Share this video if you believe in second chances for justice. This tip could be the break they needed. Spread the word. Together, we uncover the truth. Richard Allen had been living in plain sight for years, right there in the town where the girls were murdered. For 5 long years, he was just another name on a list, another face in the crowd, another tip in the pile. But when the police finally connected the dots, they were horrified by what they discovered. Richard Allen had been living in plain sight for years, but when the police finally connected the dots, they were horrified by what they discovered. It was late October 2022 when the unthinkable happened. Richard Allen was arrested. The arrest of a local man, someone who had been in the community for years, shocked everyone. The quiet, seemingly ordinary pharmacist was now suspected of one of the most horrifying crimes this town had ever seen. But there was a problem. Despite the growing pile of confessions from Richard himself, there was still no physical evidence to tie him to the murders. And that's when the case took an even darker turn. Richard Allen had confessed repeatedly, more than 60 times, to his family, to prison guards, to psychologists. He couldn't stop talking about what he had done. The details of his confessions were chilling. He described the scene, the events, the girls, in a way that seemed to confirm his guilt. No one but the killer would have known what he knew. But still, there was a catch. There was no concrete evidence, no DNA from the crime scene, no fingerprints, no murder weapon, just confessions. And confession alone is not enough to convict someone. It was a frustrating, chilling paradox. Richard Allen's confessions appear to confirm his guilt, but key pieces of evidence are still missing. As the investigation moved forward, there were growing doubts among some people in the community. Was Richard Allen truly the killer? Or was there something more to this crime? Could someone else still be out there lurking in the shadows, hiding behind the confessions of a man who may have been falsely accused? The case took another dark turn. Was Richard Allen truly the killer? Or was there something more to this crime? The arrest was just the beginning, but the truth was still unclear. Questions kept rising, unanswered. Was this the man who'd shattered so many lives? Or had they gotten it wrong? The pieces of the puzzle still didn't quite fit. The dark mystery was far from solved. Comment below if you think someone hiding in plain sight can still be brought to justice. I read and reply to every comment, and I want to hear your thoughts on this shocking turn of events. The courtroom was filled with emotion. Every word spoken, every glance exchanged was loaded with grief, anger, and an unshakable sense of anticipation. The families of Abby and Libby sat in silence, their hearts heavy, their eyes fixed on the proceedings. The courtroom became a battleground. Justice for Abby and Libby or another layer of tragedy? For years they had waited, and now finally the trial of Richard Allen had begun. As the prosecution laid out its case, one thing became abundantly clear. Richard Allen's confessions were hauntingly detailed. He had admitted it, repeatedly. To his wife, to prison guards, to anyone who would listen, he confessed his involvement in the brutal murders of two innocent girls. He knew things only the killer could know. The timeline, the specifics of the crime scene, the chilling details of what had happened that day. No one but the killer could have spoken with such certainty. But the defense was relentless. They painted a different picture. They raised questions about the quality of the investigation, pointing out inconsistencies in the evidence and the rushed nature of Richard Allen's arrest. They brought up theories that cast doubt on his guilt. Had they truly gotten the right man? Was there another explanation for his confessions? Could the confessions be the product of a broken mind, manipulated by years of confinement? Despite all the confessions, despite all the seemingly damning evidence, the defense worked tirelessly to raise questions that could potentially lead to Allen's acquittal. Their questions struck at the very heart of the case, and suddenly what had once seemed like an open and shut case became more complicated than anyone could have anticipated. Richard Allen's defense brings up new theories and questions, while the prosecution builds its case based on his confessions. The tension in the courtroom was unbearable. The families of Abby and Libby, who had already endured so much, now found themselves in the unthinkable position of waiting for a jury to decide the fate of the man who had taken everything from them. The jury would decide whether Richard Allen would finally be held accountable. But what if they got it wrong? It was up to the jury now. The weight of justice was in their hands. Would they make the right choice? Or would the truth slip through their fingers, lost in a web of doubt and defense tactics? Subscribe to our channel if you believe in justice, even when it's hard to achieve. Don't miss what comes next in this intense journey for truth. The courtroom, once a place of frantic questioning and courtroom drama, had now fallen into an uneasy silence. The air was thick with tension as everyone waited for the final moment, the sentencing of Richard Allen. The trial may be over, but the trauma and questions would linger forever. Richard Allen, who had been the center of this heart-wrenching case, now stood before the judge. His expression was unreadable, his hands clasped in front of him as he awaited the judgment. The families of Abby and Libby sat on the edge of their seats, their hearts heavy, their eyes tired but determined. The pain in their hearts had not lessened, not even after all these years. They had come so far, but this was still the moment they had been waiting for, the moment that would decide if they could finally begin to heal. The judge's voice broke through the tension, and with a measured tone, the sentence was delivered. Richard Allen was sentenced to 130 years in prison, a grim sentence, but it didn't undo the damage he had caused. But as the gavel struck, the families didn't leap for joy. No one cheered. In fact, there was only silence. For Abby and Libby's families, the weight of what had happened still hung heavily in the air. Yes, the killer had been locked away, but it didn't bring their loved ones back. It didn't fill the void left by the brutal loss of two young girls, full of promise, full of life, their futures stolen in an instant. The community of Delphi, too, was left with the uneasy feeling of closure that didn't quite feel like closure at all. Richard Allen's conviction, while a small victory, felt like a hollow one. The lingering questions, the unanswered mysteries, still plagued their minds. Richard Allen is sentenced to 130 years in prison, but the families and the community still seek closure. I mean, the question remained, did this verdict really serve justice? Were there still secrets that had yet to be uncovered? The trial had brought the man to justice, but had the truth about that day in the woods been fully revealed? Even with a sentence handed down, the questions remain. Was justice truly served, or are there more dark secrets yet to be uncovered? Now that we've walked through the entire case, let's reflect on the lessons that can keep you and your loved ones safe. These aren't just takeaways from this story, they're strategies that you can apply in your own life today. Lesson 5, always trust your instincts. When something feels off, whether it's a situation, a person, or an environment, don't second guess yourself. Your gut feeling is a powerful tool that should never be ignored. Libby and Abby's story shows us how important it is to recognize subtle signs of danger and act accordingly. Lesson 4, stay aware of your surroundings, especially when you're in unfamiliar or isolated places. It's easy to get distracted, but being alert can be the difference between safety and danger. If you're in a place that feels too quiet or too remote, trust that feeling and leave. Make sure you're aware of escape routes, exits, or help that's nearby. Lesson 3, teach your children the importance of personal safety from a young age. They should understand the basics of situational awareness, trust their instincts, and never be afraid to ask for help. Education is key in preventing dangerous situations. Lesson 2, equip your loved ones with knowledge of safe communication practices. Libby and Abby, for example, were texting and communicating with family while out, but make sure that your children or loved ones know who to contact, what to say, and when to make that call if they ever feel unsafe. Always know where they are and who they're with. Lesson 1, never ignore warning signs. If something doesn't seem right, it likely isn't. Encourage your loved ones to trust those feelings and act on them, whether it's returning home early, avoiding certain places, or talking to someone about it. Safety is a priority, and no matter how small the discomfort, it's worth addressing immediately. By understanding what happened here and knowing these steps, you can take control of your own family's safety. So what should you do next? Start implementing these strategies today, because you never know when they could make the difference between life and death. Thank you for watching, and if you want to support this story, hit subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Every bit of support helps us keep telling these important stories. If you want more gripping true crime documentaries like this one, check out our previous videos. There's always more to uncover, and we're just getting started.